welcome you to today's class. This is going to be a hybrid class, like most of our classes are now. So we've got some folks on Zoom, and they'll be able to hear anything you're saying, but we will repeat the questions for them. Laura Benjamin will be recording everything, and she'll be monitoring everything on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom and you have a question, you can type it in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll have a time for questions, and she'll monitor those from Zoom. Please remain muted on Zoom until time when we're going to have a question. And in today's class, we'll make the recording available on RVAR's YouTube channel for about 90 days afterwards. If you want to review it again or know somebody that missed it and wants to see it, it'll be there for about 90 days. And we will have a survey afterwards. And it's really important for us to know what else you'd like to know. We'd like to know what you thought of today's class and what other things you'd like to see over the next year. That helps us plan for you. We also want to mention the next two classes that we have with the RVR Education Committee. One is called Toxins in the Home. That's on Wednesday, May 15th at 11. Same 11 to 12:30 here at the RVAR. Green Home Solutions will address mold testing, removal, and prevention, as well as indoor odor removal and other air quality concerns. Also, the ABCs of foreclosure will be offered Tuesday, June 18th at 11, also at the RVAR office. Bob Hartman of Real Star Realtors will address everything from registering on the HUD site to submitting a bid and then steps from an accepted bid to closing. So it'll be another educational information for you. Registration of these is available on the RVAR website. So for today's class, we have two speakers. The first is Ben Briscoe with Black Goose Chimney. Ben's going to share his knowledge and experience with the chimney inspections, chimney sweeping, and chimney repairs. And our second speaker will be Jamie Bailey, licensed insurance agent and owner of Bailey Insurance Group. Jamie is also a branch partner and manager of Alcova Mortgage and a member of the RVAR Education Committee. So let's welcome Ben.
Howdy, everybody. So I need to get a couple of things out of the way real quick. I have an unreasonable fear of public speaking, so bear with me. Two, Beth reached out to me several months ago, informing me of who she was and what her position is in your industry. Asked me the question, which I've been dying for someone to ask me for the longest time. Would you be available to help educate some of the people that are in my industry? In my industry, that is huge. That is what we're all about. We actually have several nonprofit organizations that focus solely on that and how important it is to be able to educate not only the homeowner, but also the people that are shepherding the homeowner, leading them to a final conclusion of, do I want this? Is it the right house for me? Is my insurance company unreasonable? All of these things. So we're going to cover a few things in those areas. I'm not gonna get super technical on anything, but I also want to thank Anna, who helped me put together PowerPoint. And when I say help me, what I really mean is she did it entirely herself. She gave me a list and asked for some bullet points, and I provided the answers to her questions to the best of my ability, but she did the rest. So my name is Ben Briscoe. I'm head of operations at Black Goose Chimney Service. Black Goose Chimney Service was started the year that I was born by my father. And I started working there full time when I was 15, still graduated from high school, still graduated from college. But I personally have been doing chimneys for about 20 years now. So barring all technical difficulties, this will go smoothly. Anna, what am I going to do? I pushed there was two choices for buttons I could push.
And you chose the wrong one.
Apparently.
That happens.
That's totally what I did.
I know you did.
All right, so a little bit about myself. I am head of operations and vice president at Black Goose Chimney Service. So that is the company that I operate out of Faxton. We are located directly in between Roanoke and Lynchburg. And we do service the entirety of Roanoke, as well as surrounding counties. I'm vice president of the Mid-Atlantic Chimney Association. So the Mid-Atlantic Chimney Association, or MACA, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating chimney professionals in the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States, as well as hosting educational opportunities for realtors, fire inspectors, code inspectors, insurance agents, and things like that. I am a certified CSI chimney professional. They do have an apprenticeship program. You begin as a certified sweep, you move to certified chimney professional, and then ultimately master sweep. I'm a CMCT, meaning I am a master chimney technician. So I have gone through all of the ranks and requirements according to our national guild and have achieved their highest position. I'm a certified dryer exhaust technician, and I have also completed the fireplace investigation research and education certification. I am fire inspector number 372. So 372 total in the world. Currently, they're in their 400s. What that gives me is the ability to come into your house or anybody's house and make very factual statements that carry enormous amounts of liability. Is there any way I can get this to move? All right. Well, I can guess what that left part says. Difference between a home inspection and a chimney inspection. That's going to be one of the things that we cover here today. The importance of a chimney inspection, the different levels of inspection. So we actually have a guideline for what those different levels are, what they cover, what their purpose is, and what the circumstance is, and what you might need that specific level of inspection. We're going to cover the difference between vented, non-vented, and wood-burning appliances. Okay. We're going to cover what to be aware of with wood stoves. Is anybody here familiar with the term grandfathering? Okay. We're going to cover what that is, what it means, and if it's okay. We're going to have a little section for a couple of my anecdotal recallings here, so I can bring you into my world momentarily to tell you about some of the things that I deal with and how that might apply to some of the things that you deal with. And then ultimately, probably the big one for you guys is how is this going to help your business? We as a company have the ability to help you. And of course, you can help us in return by sending people our way. All right. Something I hear all the time when someone's talking about their home that they recently purchased or that they've been living in for anywhere from 1 to 5 years is, well, that's the home inspection. Home inspector didn't say anything about it. The home inspector said it was fine, things like this. I want to touch really quickly on what the difference between a home inspection and a chimney inspection. The best analogy I can come up with is that a home inspector is like a primary care physician, right? He can very quickly screen you and say, it looks good here, it looks good here. This is questionable. You might want to investigate this further, but I'm not the person to do that. I can refer you to someone, and you have to get a referral to go to a specialist. So the specialist is me. My guys are the specialist. And everything that we base our education on is in terms of the chimney or how it relates to the home. Right. So that includes things like venting requirements, indoor air quality, fire safety, UL listing requirements on particular appliances. Also, if an insurance company has a question about your setup, we're able to come in and answer that question. And we can do so in a very matter-of-fact way. We have the ability and the coverage to make the claims that we do, where the homeowner does not, or an unlicensed GC does not. I mentioned briefly before that I'm vice president of the Mid-Atlantic Chimney Association, and there are several other organizations that dedicate the entirety of their existence to making sure that when certified chimney technicians go out to someone's house, they are setting not only the homeowner up for success, but also themselves. We don't practice going out to people's houses and trying to scare them into buying something. That's not the proper way of doing business. You make an observation, you record your findings, You have a discussion with the homeowner about what it means. And then you answer any and all of their questions, including follow-up phone calls. If you think about the process, first of all, paying somebody to come into your home to look at something that you know very little about, other than the last time I used it, all the smoke went outside, so it must be fine, right? And then they come into your house and they poo-poo all over your stuff, but they show you the reasons why. That's a very interesting beginning to a relationship. So it's super duper important that the technician maintains good follow-up with that person after giving them the burden of hearing all of that bad news that they didn't want to hear. And I can tell you with full transparency that I can count on one hand in 20 years of doing this, all the times that I actually went into somebody's house and they were A-okay across the board. Literally, I couldn't suggest anything other than keep it maintained on an annual basis. Actually, you know what? Let me go back and touch on this real quick. That middle picture, that little yellow house. You're gonna get, specifically in my industry, but you may also experience this, where, well, the home inspector said. Okay. There are a lot of variables that play into that statement. Variables like, does the home inspector have the minimum required level of education to make that statement? Does he know? One of the things that I deal with on a regular basis is old wives' tales. Right? You can't burn pine, for instance, just as an example. When in fact, that's not true, you absolutely can. You just have to know the ramifications. Simply stating that it passed home inspection, the home inspector said it was perfectly fine, things like that, doesn't actually prove anything. We, as an industry, and as a matter of fact, home inspector does as well, we carry a book with us. Now, this is my workbook, so the cover is torn off because I use it. I actually use this on an everyday basis. Okay? And this is called the IRC. This book has all of the answers to all the questions that I can't pull out of the bowels of my mind on command. I am not a walking Rolodex of answers, but what's important about being a good technician, and I tell this to all of my guys, is one, knowing the right question to ask, and two, knowing how to find the answer. Make sure that you're armed with as much knowledge as you have the capacity to call on command, but also you want to make sure that you're giving the homeowner the best educated answer you possibly can, and that they have the ability to see it in writing as well. So important aspects of a chimney inspection. These are some of the questions that we're going to ask during that inspection. Now we're asking these as technicians, we're asking these internally. Right? And then we present our findings to the homeowner. One, was it built right? Okay, that one's huge. That is the genesis of this chimney. Was it okay? We're going to find that out to the best of our ability. Was it properly maintained? And that is a lot easier to determine than you may imagine. You can be told any number of things by a homeowner if they've lived there since the day it was built, or if they've only lived there for a year, and you can pick and choose based on your findings what portion of what they're telling you is true. As far as forensic investigation, it's some things are surprising as far as what you're being told versus what you're observing. What effects have use and abuse had on the system? That's a big one. You might be surprised to know that the difference or the line between use and abuse is very fine. There is tons of supporting documentation for what proper use is, depending on the appliance or the fireplace or its UL listing or its manufacturer's requirements. As an inspecting team, if we come in, we know what that line is. We don't live in the gray. We live in the black and white. It is or it isn't. We can tell if it's been abused. We can tell if it's been properly maintained. The effects of other elements like water, wind, lightning, freeze thaw, earthquakes, hurricane force winds, smoking in the home, There is all kinds of stuff that can directly affect the venting system or the appliance, fireplace, the wood stove, the gas appliance, any of those things. It's our job to come in and see what part those elements have played in the degradation of that venting system. So we have to be able to make observations like, has long-term water intrusion occurred? What water intrusion means by definition is the entry of water into a space that it's not supposed to go, or where you don't want it to go. Kind of like the definition of a weed. It could be a very beautiful flower, but we don't want it there. Water's great, but not inside of your house. We need to be able to make observations on, has this chimney been struck by lightning? Has it caught on fire? Fire counts as an element. Has smoking in the home degraded the venting system to a point that now it's in need of serious repair? You probably don't see that one as much, especially now that vaping is the new thing, but I'm guilty of that, I think. I'd love to stop. When we take all of these things into account, now it's no longer a question of, well, I have it swept every year. Blindly putting a brush inside of somebody's fireplace and then having the audacity to tell them to their face that, yep, it's good. It's $200. I'll see you again next year. It's a big boo-boo. It's a big boo-boo for somebody in my industry. They are setting themselves up for potentially huge loss, and they're setting up the homeowner for potentially huge loss as well. You have to be able to record findings and relay those to the homeowner in an efficient manner that they understand. Get into a couple of slides here. So I could hit you with a laundry list of stuff right now, just looking at this picture, things that I know and technical definitions of what we're looking at. But real quick on your own, just take a look at this picture. Does your brain come up with any kind of guess on what you're actually looking at? What part of the house is this?
Tiles.
Okay, they're tiles. More specifically, these are fire clay tiles, so they're not made out of terracotta. Terracotta is flower pot material. This is very similar, both in appearance and consistency and texture. Some of its long-term heat exposures are properties rather are vastly different than that of terracotta. The purpose of this material is to create a safe passageway for exhaust that's generated inside of the home to leave the atmosphere of the home. This is the intended venting orifice for a specific appliance. Some things to note about this picture: this tile liner is square. The square orifice, I know this, you don't know this, but I'm telling you now, it's small by comparison to a lot of the ones that we see. So what my industry knowledge tells me is that this is very specifically an appliance flue, meaning it likely vents a gas appliance in the basement. Or it's going to be gas because there's no soot on the inside, or it could be an oil appliance, something like that. They might have a wood stove hooked up to it that hasn't been used in years because there's no creosote on the inside walls of the tile liner. What else do you see? Does anything jump out at you?
All the cracks. The debris.
So I can show this picture to a homeowner. I can show this picture to an insurance adjuster. I can show this picture to a realtor.
You might
And
repeat the fact that everybody said cracks because on Zoom, they didn't hear that.
okay, yeah, everybody in the classroom very, very easily identified that the tile liner in the picture is pretty severely cracked. Now, if you were to ask me as a chimney professional to assign some level of severity to these cracks, I would say 11 out of 10. Okay, they're bad. They're really bad. You can look at the picture and you can see the difference in exposed interior face depth at the crack closest to the bottom of the picture, which means that not only is it cracked, but those individual pieces are moving independently of one another. Now the whole thing's changed shape. It might, yes, your brain might tell you it's a square, but it's something close to a square, but it's a little bit out of skew. Now, if you actually look further down in the chimney, you can tell that All of the other tiles are also broken. It's a little hard to tell on this picture. I see one other thing. I see some cobwebs, some stink bugs. Means it likely hasn't really been used very much, at least recently. Those breaks though, they travel from one end of that tile section to the other. Yes, we do have some that travel in a lateral fashion, but they do travel from as far down to that first joint as you can see back up towards your face. And that's called a longitudinal break. So what a longitudinal break is indicative of is extreme high heat on the inside of the chimney. It's caused by rapid thermal expansion or thermal hydraulic. It means that the interface of this material was exposed to anywhere upwards of around 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the same as the inside of the volcano. It may have been brief. It may have been that when it happened, the homeowner didn't even know it happened. That's usually the case, actually. It doesn't have to be the freight train coming through your living room, stuff that you may have heard about chimney fires. However, it was bad enough that it completely shattered that time. Now, think about it this way. If the homeowner didn't even know it happened, or the homeowner that I'm interacting with has only been there for a year, and they weren't around when all this happened, and I just put a brush on the inside of their chimney and walk away and tell them everything's okay. Worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, we're talking about loss of life. And if they have a family in the house with them, loss of multiple lives. So it is extremely important that the inspecting professional perform all aspects of whatever level of inspection they have been assigned to perform to the absolute best of their ability at all times without excuse. If you or any of your clients contract with a certified professional, the Chimney Safety Institute of America, which I know you're going to talk about too, which is really cool. The Chimney Safety Institute of America has a code of ethics that requires them to be fully transparent and make observations exactly like this, and then have a very similar conversation with homeowners that I'm having with you right now. Now, if you were to dive deeper into the photo, there are some other things that I could talk to you about. Migrated creosote, ash deposit, fly ash deposit on the interface of the tile, air wash markings. There's a ton of things. I see a misalignment down at the bottom. There are a ton of things that would ultimately lead to the suggestion of this cannot be used as is. If you have intentions of using it to vent anything, even a gas furnace, even a water heater, it needs to be relined first. This one's pretty interesting. Does anything jump out at you when you first look at this picture?
Looks like rotted wood around
Well,
the.
oh, yeah, could be water infiltration, right?
That is correct.
Make sure you repeat that for Zoom, please.
So the guess that they ventured was water infiltration, rotted wood. That's absolutely accurate. If you look at that picture on the left, you can see large amounts of discoloration on those wood framing members, as well as the roof sheathing that's in direct contact with the chimney. This points out a few different issues all at once. Have you ever personally gone into your attic with the sole intention of looking at your chimney? I don't know anybody that has. Okay. A lot of people are surprised to find out that I, as a chimney technician, or any of the people in my industry, are required to gain access to their attic so that they can visually see the chimney as it passes through the structure of the home in the attic space. Okay, but this is a huge part of an inspection, because how the chimney passes through the attic can determine a lot of things. Some of the things that you're going to see in this picture, one, you already called it, water infiltration. We call it water intrusion. Two, to get a little bit more specific on that, if you'll notice how it's isolated primarily to the chimney, what that's telling me is that the chimney is behaving like a sponge. So are any of you familiar with Scotch-Brite, the kitchen sponge chimney? Pardon me, the kitchen sponge company? So bright yellow and green kitchen sponges. let's say you have an $800,000 house. You love it. Everything's great. It's perfect. It's beautiful. The architecture is outstanding. The roof is fantastic. If you could stand in front of that house and see this chimney that you probably don't pay as much attention to as you do the pillars on the front porch or the arches over the front windows on the house. But very quickly, just look at that chimney and imagine it is a bright yellow and green kitchen sponge, because that is exactly what it is. Exactly. I couldn't be more specific on the term. As far as porosity and rate of absorption, it is identical. If you were to take a glass of water and throw that water on your brick chimney, you would notice that immediately it darkens and discolors, and almost none of the water that has hit the chimney then hits the ground. It's absorbed into the chimney. Right? So you could have a $100,000 roof with a giant sponge coming up of it. And that's totally realistic. I laugh, I joke, but I'm being realistic. Explaining that to a homeowner is sometimes kind of a hard thing to do, especially one that's proud of their house. That's the nice way to put it. Proud of their house, right? Can't be told that anything could be better. But when you go into the attic, the pictures don't lie. What's happening here is referred to as lateral water transfer. So in my industry, we know that the driving force, actually, we all learned this in elementary school. So we apply the things that we learned in elementary school to our profession. We know that the driving force for water in its liquid state is gravity. Right? Gravity is pulling all liquid and solid objects towards the center of the earth at all times. We also remember the water cycle. Okay? So the water cycle dictates that liquid water is moving towards the surface of the earth, and then as it evaporates, it returns to the atmosphere, and then rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat happens over and over again. As that liquid water is trapped inside of that chimney because it's a sponge, it's being pulled down. And it's entering the attic space because the exposure occurs above the roof. As it enters the attic space, which is always the hottest part of the house, especially in the summertime, you see rapid evaporation and rapid movement of water away from the chimney. You also think about the fact that this chimney doesn't meet minimum clearance requirements because I have an actual wood framing member in direct contact with the chimney, which is a big no-no. Now, that otherwise dry framing member is being exposed to the sponge that's getting water exposure above the roof, and it's pushing that water sideways. Lateral water transfer means that gravity is no longer the driving force for that water in its liquid state, but rather an abutting material's ability to absorb that water off of that sponge-like structure. This is something that we see all the time inside the attic space and in your finished walls and in your basement and on the inside of your chimney. We see it all the time, but nobody's ever seen it before us. Right? So it's important that we don't just observe it and talk about it. We take a picture so we can show people to their face. This is what you're dealing with. You're talking about potentially mold and mildew. You're talking about rotting framing members or sheathing members. You're talking about loss of structural integrity potentially. There's a lot that could go wrong. It's not my job to come in there and scare people. It's just my job to come in there and state the facts. This is simply put, not okay. And I strongly recommend that you do something about it. This is a good one. And the reason I say it's good is because I see probably 5 of these a week. If you think about the angle from which this photo was taken, the average homeowner does not gain this vantage point. I'm looking physically at the top of a chimney right now. You cannot see that from the driveway. You cannot see it from the front road. You cannot see it from the yard. You can't see it from the back porch. You can't see it from your living room. Even if you took the time to gain access to the attic, which you likely won't, you can't see it from there either. You have to be in one specific part of the property to get a shot like this. So you remember I mentioned before that the chimney is the equivalent of a Scotch-Brite sponge, specifically a masonry chimney, brick, stone, cinder block. Real quick, off this picture, if you could imagine that you are holding a Scotch-Brite sponge in your hand, you're running it beneath water, You're wringing it out and your brain is telling you, yes, I can confirm by observation and experience that this sponge is in fact absorbent. We would all come to that same conclusion, I'm sure. Okay. Go to the butcher's block, pull a steak knife out, cut that sponge. Make superficial cuts right across the top. Perform the same experiment over. Now with a sponge that has lacerations in the face. We would likely come to the same or a similar conclusion that it is still absorbent. Do we then go on to make a factual statement based on our observation that it is somehow now more absorbent because there are cuts in it? Does anybody in this room believe that that would be true? Do we think that somehow because there's a cut in that sponge, it has the ability to absorb more water and hold more water than it did before? I would say no. I would say it's identical to the way that it was before. It has just been damaged. That's all. If you see masonry that has cracks, and those cracks have been filled in, what you're seeing is a futile effort at the prevention of further water intrusion. What you see here is an attempted repair at cracks that were left behind by what's called freeze thaw. Mentioned before, I'm not going to get super duper technical, so I will spare you some of the intricacies of that process. But ultimately, what I'm talking about is the intrusion of water in an absorbent structure and then experiencing sub-freezing temperatures that cause that water to expand. This exact kind of damage exists on almost every single chimney of every single house that you have ever looked at buying or selling for a client. I can gain access to the roof and I can identify cracks in the crust and wash. Now, would I call the cracks a problem? Only if the cracks are ultimately leading to removal or potential failure of components of that chimney, as in individual bricks or pieces of mortar falling down and hitting the the neighbor's kid in the head or going through the windshield. Yes, that's a problem. But what the crack is initially is an indicator of a larger problem, the absorbency of the structure, which then ties back into what we saw in the attic: mold and mildew, structural integrity, indoor air quality, all these things. This particular photo also shows 3 individual tiles like what we saw before. And for a little bit more reference into what we were looking at in that first photo, that tile farthest away from you in this photo, that is an 8 square appliance flue. And you can see by comparison that the other 2 flues are larger. So their cross-sectional dimensions have the ability to transport more gas, a higher volume of gas at a faster rate. You can also see damage to those individual tiles. You can see cracks in this closest tile here. You can see delamination on both of the larger tiles. And here's a big one for insurance. In reference to the cracks that exist on the crown wash, which is that flat tabletop surface at the top of the chimney, the cracks that are directly radiating away from the flue, specifically if other conditions are met, like I have a broken tile at the top, right? If those cracks are radiating away from the flue, upon further investigation, I might venture to guess that they are actually physically caused by a chimney fire. Rapid thermal expansion, hydraulic action. As that tile expands because it's subjected to extremely high heat, there is no force on this earth that's going to prevent it from expanding. No such force, no such object exists. And because of that, if this is acting as a constraint, it will fail, and when it does, it breaks. I have seen many times where rapid thermal expansion caused a crown wash to come apart. I've also been made aware of many chimney service companies, many general contractors, many handymen that aren't aware of that. And it's really important that when I speak to those people, I make sure that they're aware. Because if you're looking at potential insurance coverage on a sudden occurrence event, which is what an insurance company exists to protect you from, this gets rolled into that. I wasn't there before the fire happened. I wasn't there when the fire happened. But I do know that my observations tell me that it is likely that at the time of that sudden occurrence event, this damage was caused. Now, it may have gotten worse since that sudden occurrence event. Water may have aggravated it a little bit more. It's true. But, you know, if I, as the inspecting professional, or if any inspecting professional comes in and sees something quite like this, they need to take into account. This requires closer observation. I need to gain access to portions of the home. What we're looking at here is, do you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Is a chimney fire, the results that you're showing us here, covered by a homeowner's insurance?
Yes, specifically if certain conditions.
Repeat the
Pardon
question.
What the gentleman asked is, are the results of a chimney fire covered by insurance? So we're looking at specifically homeowners insurance. The answer to that question is yes, as long as a few conditions are met. One, can we confirm that the chimney fire occurred at the time that the occupant of the dwelling lived there and was covered by said insurance company? Okay. Best way to make sure that can be confirmed is that they call 911. That's always the best option. If you think you're having a chimney fire, call 911. You don't have to pay them to come to your house. It's literally their job. And it could potentially be the thing that saves your life. But in doing so, there is a document that is then created showing factual evidence that yes, on this day at this time, there was a chimney fire here. And then the insurance company has to look at that and say, he's right, there was. Let's see how bad it is. And what portions of that are we responsible for? Because they're not responsible for 100% a lot of the time, which is fair. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
What we're looking at here, I'm just,
No, and it may be later on in your presentation, but I was just wondering, is there any way that the naked eye can maybe see that a chimney may have some problems and may need to be inspected? Say, like you walk to the house and you know, I forget where the mantle is. Is there any evidence around where the mantle is that's like, maybe the chimney might have a problem?
sure, yeah. There's a particular buildup
Repeat the
referred to.
question, please.
I'm really bad at that.
That's why I'm here.
So,
That's my job.
so what the gentleman asked is there any way that even an untrained professional using their naked eye could maybe look at a chimney briefly and tell, maybe this needs some attention? Is that about,
Yeah.
sum up your question? Okay. And the response that I would give would be yes, there is. There are several key indicators for potential chimney issues that even the average homeowner can pick up on pretty quickly. We've got things like efflorescence, which is a white crystalline material that deposits on the face of masonry. That's an indicator for water intrusion. It looks like chalk. If you've got chalk on the front of your bricks in your house at your fireplace, you've got an issue and you should call somebody. Where the hearth extension, which is the bench essentially in front of your fireplace, is rolling away from your fireplace face, it's also an indicator of water intrusion issues, as well as improper clearance to combustibles and improper original construction. A fireplace smell in your living room, you should not be able to smell your fireplace. It is a negative or natural draft appliance. It should only be pulling air out of the home and sending it up to the top of the chimney. If you have a reverse draft, it's an indicator of an issue. The list goes on. There's tons of things, but probably the most important of any portion of any response that I could possibly give you is, if you think there might be a problem, or if you want to know if there's a problem, contact your local professional. Certainly. Because you as the homeowner probably don't even know the right questions to ask. You might know a few of them. I don't have enough hours in the day to cover everything, but it could also be that when a inspecting professional comes into your house, they present things to you that you're like, okay, I had no idea that was even a thing. Right? Additionally, they carry the burden of insuring themselves. Right? So if they make non-factual statements or lead you to some place of complacency by telling you everything's okay, anything like that, then they are legally liable for whatever may come next. What you're looking at here is a picture of the underside of a hearth extension. We'll cut this short. I've been informed by Anna that I'm running over. I never thought I'd have too many things to say. What we're seeing in this picture is technically wrong because Chapter 10 of IRC dictates and requires that all combustible framing members be removed from the underside of a hearth extension and a hearth post-original construction. You can plainly see here that what we're looking at is wood. The location of that wood is directly beneath and in front of the main floor fireplace. That's a big no-no. You can also see the very, very obvious discoloration of that wood. You see that it's black. Okay. That's not necessarily charring. It could also be water intrusion. But this is something that is looked for in a level 2 inspection. On your left, you will see a 13 square tile that has one crack in the corner. And that again is a longitudinal crack, which is indicative of sudden occurrence event, like a chimney fire. And on your right, you will see a picture that shows clear evidence for the absorbency of a chimney. We do not see water streaking in the tile that we're looking down from, but we do see it traveling through the joint beneath that tile and further down. All right, so we know that that little streak of water did not come in from the top of the chimney, but rather the side of the chimney. There are 3 different levels of inspection as dictated by NFPA 211. So NFPA 211 is one of a few governing codes and standards for Southwest Virginia in particular, but many places in the United States, as well as all over the world for the IRC. Level 1 is very standard, flashlight and mirror. Don't need a ladder, don't need any special tools. It is your chimney professional coming into your house, taking a quick peek and saying, okay, well, these are the things that I see. A lot of chimney professionals roll a level 1 in with their standard suite. What's super important is that that chimney professional actually performs all aspects of that level 1. Rather than sweeping it like this, you know, and saying, yeah, you're good to go. There's a lot to be told with a flashlight. I will say that a level 1 most often leads to the suggestion for a level 2. So level 2 includes all aspects of a level 1, plus the condition of accessible portions of the chimney structure and all enclosed flues, proper clearance to combustibles in accessible locations, size and suitability of flues. You can read, the list goes on the things that we are required to observe and document during level 2 inspection. We require access to portions of the home like the attic, the basement, the rooftop. We are required to put a camera physically on the inside of every flue in a similar chimney. Level 2 inspection is isolated to a particular chimney. I can perform 2 separate level 2 inspections at the same house on the same day if it has 2 chimneys. A chimney is the large structure. A flue is the smaller holes that pass through that chimney. I can have one chimney with 20 flues, or I can have a chimney with 1 flue. One really super important thing to note for everybody that's in this room or everybody that's watching is, it says here, circumstances. The very last part of that blue square says, upon the sale or transfer of the property. Now, how many of you are actually aware that it is a requirement according to National Fire Code that a certified chimney professional come in and inspect that chimney at no less than a level 2 inspection? Have you ever heard that in the entirety of your professional career? Okay. I'm not surprised at all. Not surprised. It is like that in the majority of the United States. It absolutely is. And one of the things that the organizations that I work with or am affiliated with is trying to do is create the opportunity for a conversation on why that is. It is likely that at some point in your career, you were directly responsible for the sale of a home that somebody became dissatisfied with. You may not have heard about it after the fact, but I came in after the fact and said, oh man, it's just been a nightmare. It's been one thing after the next. I didn't know there was going to be $100,000 worth of stuff to do to this place. There's a generalist and there's a specialist. I'm really good at chimneys, terrible at radon. I don't know the first thing about it. Okay. Gutters, I'm not your guy. Windows, absolutely not. Chimneys, I'm your guy. And there's tons of guys in the industry that are the exact same way. They know a lot about one thing. So this is pulled directly from chapter 15 of NFPA 211. There's a table that states the scope, the circumstances, and the indications for different levels of inspection. And this is the code that the state of Virginia adheres to.
Can you clarify? So what, this is when you replacement of an appliance with a different unit.
Mhm.
So what if they haven't replaced any appliances that would use that flue? That wouldn't be a circumstance that you're in, right?
Let's see, it says when removing one or more, let me get back real quick
Uh,
before you remind me. She had a very specific question about replacement of an appliance with a different unit. So that's highlighted there in the blue box in the center of the slide. She said specifically, what if there had never been anything there?
Well, I mean, you said, did you know, and you made your statement, and I'm not sure I quite heard it all, but how it related to that circumstance. So I'm wondering, is every house you sell, you're saying you're supposed, or only when they replace an appliance with another appliance?
I see what you're
That
saying.
becomes the rule.
Okay, so she's asking, does the statement in the center of your screen? Is it fluent from one end to the other, or are those separate circumstances?
Yeah.
They are in fact separate circumstances divided by commas or
Oh.
semicolons. So,
Because you don't know what a prior owner of a home has actually done to the home
so,
or not done to the home.
so the existence of the so this is pulled directly out of the code book. The existence of the semicolon means we're on the same subject, but we're moving to a different portion of it. Right? It's not an if then across. It is an if and then as a whole. So on that final semicolon, we see upon sale or transfer of the property. That is the only qualifying condition there. Is the house being sold or bought? If yes, then the requirement is no less than level 2. Level 3 is essentially level 2, which includes the scope of a level 1, plus access to any portions of the home or chimney that may otherwise be concealed. So that is when the inspecting technician comes in and performs a level 2 and says, but I do have some questions about this and I can't tell. I'm gonna have to take your wall out. I'm gonna have to cut a hole in your chimney. I'm going to have to create an access to the attic because one doesn't exist.
What's the typical cost of a level 2 inspection?
It really depends on, what
Repeat
company you
question.
contract. Maybe by the end of this presentation, I'll finally get one of this right. What the lady asked was, what is the typical cost for a level 2 inspection? My answer to that would be that it really depends on who you contract with and what level of expertise they have. I can only speak for my company. As far as what our cost of doing business is that a level 2 inspection begins at $450. And what the homeowner or the realtor would get as a result is a very detailed inspection report. And if there were any findings that were potentially detrimental, a proposal attached to that inspection report. Go ahead.
How quickly, I mean, I know the backup with cleanings normally is multiple weeks, 6, 7, 8 weeks. What about, if I needed a level 2 inspection for chimney?
So the gentleman asked that
Because that's one of the biggest problems in our industry with your services, that trying to get someone to come out there, actually take a look at it within time to do it before closing,
timelines.
or even, our inspection limits is almost impossible.
So the gentleman asked, what's the average lead time on a level 2 inspection? He also made an anecdotal reference of averaging anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks on a sweep appointment. And I would say that at certain times of the year, depending on when you're calling, that is absolutely true. I don't have a great fix for that. When I say I don't have a great fix, what I really mean is I put the ball in your court, and I'll touch back on something that I already said. We now, everybody in this room is aware that it is a requirement. I have shown you the text in the code book that states that it is a requirement. So if every transaction that you enter, you know this has got to be done at some point, then that vastly increases your opportunity to have it done. You're not getting hit with it at the last second. You're not saying, oh, we're closing in 48 hours. I need it done right now. You're entering the circumstance knowing that at some point through this transaction, I've got to get this done. It has to be done.
You said that's not, that's not a realtor, so, you know, that's not a NAR requirement for a realtor requirement. I just want to clarify, that is a fire code requirement.
That's accurate.
Repeat for the state and the city.
Yes, for the entirety of the state of Virginia. So what she said is, what I have said to you conversationally on the presentation form is that it is a fire code. It is not a, I'm sorry, what was the acronym you used?
NAR?
NAR?
NAR, right, National Association of Realtors.
Okay, it is not a NAR. That's a new one on me. I've never heard that. It is not a NAR requirement. That is factual. That is true. At least my understanding is that is factual. You would likely be more filled in on what NAR requires of you as an individual, being that that's your employee. Just as when I come in and tell you, if the builder's code says this, then it must be. If the fire code says this, then it must be. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know we're short on time. The other thing I think I wanted to, I lost it.
In my opinion, as a realtor, life is too important. And it's not worth saying, oh, well, I don't think that's my job. It's too important. And when I've had clients that are looking at a house and they're considering that, I start that discussion immediately to try to educate them.
That's probably a really good approach. Because you, as a realtor, have a lot of things that you're responsible for during a transaction. There are certainly an enormous amount of things that you absolutely should not, under any circumstance, say or insinuate, lest you be labeled or hit with some level of liability. A lot of this, what I'm presenting to you, is essentially your scapegoat. I become the bad guy. My guys become the bad guy. The inspecting professional becomes the bad guy. He comes in with the bad news. Sometimes it's good news. Yeah, and it's she's dancing back and forth. I'll let you know that best industry practice. So as far as inspecting chimney professionals, best approach is to always start with a level 2. Gives you a good A to Z on everything that the homeowner may need to know about the chimney, or any future service professionals may need to know about the chimney, or any insurance agent or realtor may need to know about the chimney.
So I found my question. In the beginning, you talked about having a properly maintained chimney. What does that mean for us? What is a properly maintained as homeowners and realtors? What's a properly maintained chimney?
So what the lady asked was, what does it mean to have a properly maintained chimney? If you look at the fire code, what you will see is that the only requirement of a properly maintained chimney is that it be inspected by a professional no less than 1 time a year. Now, if that professional gives you a list of recommendations and you choose not to abide by those, that's totally on you. It's not on the professional. As long as that professional uses the proper wording in their paperwork, stating things like suggest not using as is, anything like that. If they see something that's potentially hazardous, they're in the clear. But the written technical answer to your question is annual inspection, but it does go a little bit further. They're not just there for fun. They're there to tell you the truth.
So as a homeowner, I don't have any fireplaces, but I have, gas radiant heat. So there is a chimney, and so I should have that inspected as well.
Yes.
Like those cracks we were looking at in those, okay, once a year.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a quick question.
What she asked was, she has gas radiant heat in her own home. So this is from the perspective of a homeowner rather than the perspective of just a realtor necessarily. She asked very specifically, is it a requirement that she has it inspected once a year? And the answer to that is very simply yes, it is. If it vents through the chimney, then yes, you are required to have it inspected once a year. As far as, is it okay if I run over a couple of minutes?
How much do you have to?
It's fine.
Yeah.
I'll make it, I'll wrap it up as quickly as I possibly can. Oh, something. Screen changed.
Oh,
I think
oh,
we're disconnected.
look at Laura.
Muzzle the box.
That's mine. It's okay.
It's her stuff. She can break it.
Well,
You might need Jim.
we got kicked out of Zoom is what it was.
Jim?
You want to try? Get back in.
It got, internet got kicked off. Technology's awesome when it works. There it goes. All right.
Right, Anna saved the day. All right, Anna. Yeah,
Sorry.
thank God y'all weren't left in my hands. Technologically speaking, I am just as dumb as they come. Difference in gas, vented and non-vented, and wood. As far as inspection concerns, there is no difference. We are there to perform all of the requirements of whatever level of inspection we are there to perform. So regardless of what appliance you have venting through there, it may play a small part in my inspection, but that doesn't mean, oh, well, you've got non-vented gas, I don't have to get in your attic. No, it doesn't mean. I'm there to answer as many questions as I possibly can. Any inspecting professional is there to answer any questions that they possibly can and perform. I hate to say this, it sounds bad, but at very least, the bare minimum requirements of whatever level of inspection they're there to perform. Two different types of gas units. We have vented and non-vented. The name is pretty self-explanatory. Vented does produce exhaust that must be vented out of the home. We'll need to have the proper lining installed or a properly maintained venting system inside of the chimney. Non-vented or room vented gas appliances produce exhaust that can be vented into the home, and they do not require the installation of a liner to room vent. They do still, however, have manufacturer's requirements for installation and UL listing requirements as far as, is the chimney, is the fireplace, is it code compliant? If no, then we start over at square one, which is how do we make it be that way? Main things you need to know about wood stoves. One, what are the manufacturer's requirements for installation and servicing? That's a big one. Two, is the appliance UL listed? And three, what are the system's venting requirements? Code is very interesting in that it provides several layers of protection for a specific question. If you propose a question to the book, the inanimate object that is the Bible for all things home building, they'll say, well, you won't find that here, revert to this. Okay, you go to that, it says, well, it's not here, you revert to this. And ultimately what you end up at is, what do the people that made the product say you have to do? Then that becomes gospel. If it's UL listed, whatever they tell you have to do is what you have to do. And you could find that it's in direct violation of what all other code tells you. But if they've tested it to be that, and it's approved to be that, then that's what you adhere to. And that's a big technicality that can get in the way of a lot of stuff.
What does UL mean?
Underwriters Laboratories.
Okay, thank you.
So it is the performance of a very expensive test or number of tests that prove that a very specific product will perform a very specific function under very specific circumstances. Grandfathering. It was right when it was built. Codes change. What codes are based on is long-term cumulative observation. Not one guy in a room watching his fireplace and see if it burns his house down. It's cumulative. It's based on observation of professionals in a specific industry, as well as any affiliations that they may have with, well, in our case, fire inspectors and fire marshals, people that directly come in and investigate the cause of a fire. As time goes on, and this is true for literally every aspect of life, people gain a better understanding of what should or should not be acceptable. Do you guys feel like that's true? I'll give you an example: asbestos. Okay. It was fantastic at what they intended it to be used for. And then they found out what causes mesothelioma. Okay. All right. So humans get better at humaning over time. I will say ultimately that as a species, we are somewhat destructive. So we have to have checks in place. See the question here: what is retroactivity? Retroactivity is the legal definition of grandfathering. So if you were to appear in a court of law and at any point of time during litigation, there was a mention of grandfathering, the term that you would hear is retroactivity. And that's important for you to know in case you get dragged into anything by a disgruntled homeowner or buyer or seller or anything like that. Is it acceptable? This one's easy. No, it is not. You do not see modern day electricians going in and installing from ground up rod and tube. You do not see that. Okay. You do not see car manufacturers creating vehicles that only run on leaded gasoline. You won't find that. Okay. Fire codes are essentially the science behind safely putting fire in the middle of your home where you and all of your loved ones and all of your possessions dwell. Okay. So it is important, it is imperative that we adhere as closely to them as we possibly can, because they are a direct reflection of what we know as a collective unit of people making observations. A change will come, an observation is made, a new change. Does that make good sense? There you go. There's a big one. That's scary to read, right? Should we sue because we were not properly informed? Okay. I personally have run into a couple of circumstances where the homeowner was extremely upset. Not necessarily with me, but with the news that was presented to them. You guys are responsible for creating listings. This is one of the things that you do. In those listings, you will find that in the year 2024, you will almost never see any mention whatsoever of this fireplace. You don't see it. You'll see a picture, but as far as actual verbiage used to explain what they're looking at, they won't talk about the fireplace. Why? A very simple statement can lead to enormous amounts of liability, especially if you use words like working, serviceable, lovely, beautiful. A picture can be deceiving. You know, it's true that when somebody comes in to potentially buy a home and they've already looked at the listing, yes, their eyes can confirm that it is in fact a fireplace. Is it pretty? Well, that's subjective. Is it usable? Has anybody ever taken the time to find out if it is? Is it working? That's a working is a loaded description. Okay. Several times it has been proposed to me that, well, what if I pursue the home inspector? What if I pursue the realtor? What if I pursue the agency for the words that they've used in describing to me what is acceptable? So I'm here to tell you, in order to limit your own liability, if anybody asks you questions about the fireplace, your response should be this and only this. You should ask a certified professional. If you utter the words, you are implying that something is as you say it is. And you can be found liable for that. Maybe not wholly liable, but you can be found liable. So protect yourself. Cover your butt. If you don't know, don't pretend to know. Say, call somebody that might know. We might not know either. But I've got a book that tells me all the answers to all the questions that I don't have the answers for. So ways that this can help you, and this is going to wrap it up. For buyers, if you're working with a buyer, this could potentially provide a bargaining chip for them. This could be a way out of paying an absorbent price for a home. I know the market is crazy and has been for a while, and it's not getting any better right now. I was subjected to that market not that long ago, and it was insane. If an inspecting technician comes in and finds things are wrong, let's say it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 80, 100, $200,000 worth of stuff that are wrong, which happens. Now they have a bargaining chip. Say, okay, well, you've listed the home at this price. It needs this as a bare minimum. You know, this is the primary heat source for the house. It's going to cost this many dollars to make it be what it needs to be. Okay, well, the seller cannot ignore that. They can say, okay, well, I don't want to do business with you. I'll find somebody that's okay with that and is willing to eat that, but you know, it's likely that that's not the way that that's going to go. As far as working with a seller, it provides the seller a realistic scope for, here's some things that might come up in conversation. We've identified these things, list A to Z, and here's a realistic idea of what it might mean for you as a seller, be it cost or conversation, the opportunity to maintain integrity, which is super important. It will also potentially give the seller the ability to properly spotlight an appliance. Okay, so if I came in and I'm working with a seller and I identify something that's wrong and I address it. Now, on that listing that you're responsible for creating, based on the documentation that my company or any company, any professional chimney company has provided, you can absolutely say, look at this lovely working fireplace. If that's what our documentation says. If it's serviceable, if it's been labeled as serviceable, then yes. If a professional and certified sweep outfit has come and classified something as serviceable, now they have assumed that liability. And that means that you can use better words. You can use words that are more enticing to somebody that really likes their fireplace. And last but not least, helps you cover your butt. You're passing any level of liability that you may have maintained on to a separate agency. Do anybody have any questions?
For the repairs that you, or like suggestions for repairs, is that something that your company also completes, or is that something that a separate licensed contractor completes? Or how does that, what is the suggestion as far as the findings of getting those items repaired?
For my company in particular,
Good question.
oh,
You almost got out of it.
what the young lady asked was, as far as any suggestions for repair, does my company in particular have the ability to perform those repairs? So I can speak both on behalf of my company. About 99% of the time, yes, we can, unless it's something that's outside of our wheelhouse, like jacking up a chimney or running a gas line or anything like that. We can't do those things. And I will also say the same is true for a lot of professional chimney companies. When I loosely use the term professional, what I really mean might not be the same thing as what this means, the IRC, this giant Bible down here. But what I mean is somebody that is qualified, competent, certified, insured, and professional.
I see what we'll hold, I'm sure Ben will stay after
Sure.
for questions. We really do have to go to the general.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Wow, was that a great presentation or what? Like, this is a good chance to learn a lot of things from Ben. As you can tell, he's very educated. And I can tell you personally, he's been on a couple of my deals and has, from what I've heard from the realtors, done a really great job. So kudos to you, Ben, and thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation. I'm Jamie Bailey with Bailey Insurance Group, and I have with me today Lisa Bailey, who is my office manager. And as well, we will be here after the class. If you have any questions, just let us know. I'm gonna go through pretty quickly. I thought it was important that Ben get his information out to you because you are the guys that deal with the listing agents and the buyers. And I think the better you can be educated on that, the better agent that you're gonna be. And I would encourage you on the listing side, if you get the listing, I would ask your sellers, you know, when is the last time you had your chimney inspected? Do you have a copy of those results? I know, you know, you don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I think it is important that you realize the liability that comes with burning apparatuses and fireplaces. There is a huge liability there. Okay, so importance of fireplaces and wood stoves. Seems like a lot of people want them. A lot of people love them. Can they enhance the property value? Yes, they can, especially if it's in a remote location. A lot of people use them for backup power. A lot of people will even use them to cook on if they lose power. If you have, you know, one of those old potbelly wood stoves that has a flat top, you can put your pans on there and just cook away if you don't have power. So they are functional. They look pretty. Seems like a lot of women like to have fireplaces in their living rooms. It's a great selling feature for a house. And it can keep your pipes from freezing in the wintertime if you have a secondary backup source of heat. So with insurance, basically what the carriers are looking at is the risk of the property. What's in the property? What's around the fireplace? Is it fireproof material? Or is it something else like wood? As Ben showed you, you know, you don't want combustible and flammable materials around any source of fire. So on the insurance side, when the clients call into the office, Lisa's going to ask them questions and they don't have a clue as to what the answer is. They really don't. None of them do. I can tell you, none do. So when they call in, Lisa's going to ask, well, you know, what do you have in the property? Is it a fireplace? Is it a wood stove? Is it a pellet stove? Is it a gas stove? You know, is it a gas fireplace? What is it? Usually the client has no idea what they have. They have no idea when it was built, when it was installed, when it was last checked, when it was last cleaned. At that point, Lisa's going to recommend they get an inspection because the carrier, whoever the insurance company is, whether it's Progressive, Travelers, you know, all these names you've heard, they're going to want to know the answer to the question, right? Because they're insuring this home and they want to know what's our exposure here. You know, if the chimney hasn't been cleaned and it catches on fire and the whole house burns down, the carrier has to pay the cost, right? Because everybody wants their house rebuilt and replaced once it catches on fire. So we're going to ask those questions. The carrier is going to ask those questions. And a lot of times the carrier will ask for proof that the appliance or the fireplace has been inspected and been checked. So along with the fire hazard potential that you have with the home, you also have safety concerns. You know, are there carbon monoxide devices in the house? Are there smoke detectors in the house? They need to be in there. They need to be working. This is a concern. And that's where Ben will come in, he'll look at it overall, and he will make recommendations as to, hey, you know, this isn't right. This needs to be fixed. You need this, you need that. We depend on him as a professional to tell us that. Common causes of fireplace and wood stove related incidences, 25% on home heating fires was the failure to clean creosote from the equipment primarily from the chimney itself. 52% of fire-related deaths were caused by placing flammable things too close to the heating equipment. And sometimes flammable things isn't, a gallon of gas, sometimes it's paper, sometimes it's wood, sometimes it's carpet. It depends. That's why the carriers want an inspection. They want to know, is there a difference between, say, a wood stove and a wall? Is it the required minimum distance? Is there fire backing material on that wall to prevent it from catching on fire? And same thing with the floor. Is there fireproof material on the floor to prevent it from catching on fire? That's a very reasonable question, especially if you're insuring the home and you're going to pay out hundreds of thousands of dollars if it catches on fire. 49% of home heating fires occur in January and February. That's when people's power goes out. That's when they're using those appliances. And, they may buy the home and say, oh, we're not worried about that. We're not going to use it. If your power goes out, you're going to use it. They're going to stay warm. Self-installs without proper clearances or heat-proof, fireproof material. There are a lot of people who will get a good idea that they want to install gas logs in their fireplace, install a wood stove in their basement, and they do not call the insurer. They do not notify the insurer. They don't ask any questions. They just think, I can do it. I'm going to do it myself. So on the listing side, when you go to look at this house, you see it, it's there, it looks good, but you don't know for a fact that it's good. You really don't. And that's what's scary. Not disposing of ashes in a safe and proper manner. That is also a common cause of fireplace fires. Sometimes people will get their ashes out, they'll just set them in the bucket and leave it there. That's not good. Don't want to do that. So always on homeowners insurance, an inspection of the stove or fireplace is necessary. Of course, everybody as a professional wants to make sure that the occupant of the home is safe. That's the main objective, is safety. We don't ever want to see anybody get hurt or killed in a fire. We want to know that the property is safe for the people to live in. So Ben had given a picture of the chimney cap from the top. And here's the issues on the insurance side. The insurance underwriters, when they get a bind request on a policy, they'll go to Google Earth and they'll go to Zillow and they'll look at pictures. And I'm fortunate enough that I have appraisal pictures, but appraisers don't get up on the roof. And we can bind the policies without a fireplace inspection. What happens when we do that is a representative from the carrier drives out to the property and they get paid to take pictures of the property, typically only on the outside. So a lot of times, maybe your clients might call up and say, hey, somebody was at my house taking pictures. Usually that's the insurer's representative. They're there to see, what are we insuring? Are tree limbs overhanging? What's going on? Are there vines crawling up the side of the house, eating into the mortar? What's going on that property? When these folks come out to inspect the property, they don't get up on the roof like Ben does. They have like this telescoping camera, and they telescope it up and they take their little pictures, click, 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 and that's all you get. That's it. So the insurer relies on trusted professionals, just like you guys do, to give them a report as to what's going on in that home. I will say, I do not know of any insurers that will allow homemade wood stoves. And it's very common for a lot of men to want to make a homemade wood stove and put it out in their little detached garage, especially when they live out in the country. That's pretty common. They want to have heat out there in their garage. If it's a homemade wood stove, not safe. Would not recommend it. Liability coverage. as Ben said, here's where we get into a little tricky place. Homeowners insurance does cover fires. It does. However, there is usually an investigation. And if that carrier finds out that someone has lied on the condition of the property, the condition of what they're insuring, the nature of what they're insuring, they can deny that claim. So it's very important for the clients to know what they have in the house, what condition it's in, when it was last cleaned, and what's going on with it. Is it safe? Is it not safe? So the factors that affect your insurance premiums, those are basically the same as when you apply to get a mortgage. There is an insurance score. It's not like a credit score, but it is an insurance score. And the insurance score tells people, tells insurers, can you afford to put tires on your car when they're bald? Can you afford to have the tree limbs that are overhanging your house cut down if they're needed? Can you afford to fix your soffit and your gutters so that the water is properly draining out of the gutters and not running behind and creating wood rot and damage to your house? So insurance score is definitely important. So then when you dig a little deeper, you look at, okay, what are we insuring? What is it? When we get to specifically fireplaces and wood stoves, they want to know, where is it inside the home? How old's the home? How old's the apparatus that's burning the fire? Has anybody inspected it? Was it installed correctly? Has it been maintained? When? When was it last inspected? Was it 10 years ago or was it 2 years ago? All this is going to affect what the borrowers pay for homeowners insurance. So the greater the risk, the greater the cost. Safety measures and best practices, regular inspections. If anybody asks us, we're telling them every year, you should have that thing inspected every year. We don't know what they're burning in their fireplace. We don't know how often they burn it. We don't know if they use it, they don't use it, it's for looks, they might use it. We don't know. So as a basic recommendation, we're going to say every year, you need to have it inspected every year. Do you have teenagers at your house cooking marshmallows in the fireplace? We don't know these things. So it's going to be a general recommendation. Proper ventilation. If you're having a fire, you need to try to shut that thing down, open a window, be sure the flue's open, and call a professional. Like he said, if your clients or you have a fire, you want to dial 911. You want that on record, always. Ben and I are going to differ a little bit here on the maintenance tips. I know he said old wives' tales about burning pine. I can tell you from a carrier standpoint, we're going to tell you not to. We don't want things going up the chimney that are going to increase the chance of having a fire. Like we don't want that. So we're going to tell you to burn hardwoods, seasoned woods, regularly clean up your ashes, clean the hearth, install a chimney cap. Best time to inspect your home is before the burning season. So each fall, you should have a reminder in your phone. Hey, chimney inspection, need to get it done. Keep debris and flammable items away from the fireplace. I have seen a lot of insurance pictures, and when the person who goes out to take the insurance pictures for the carrier, sometimes they'll knock on the door to see if the person will let them in to look around. Don't have to. But if you do, those pictures that they take are going back to the carrier. And commonly what we see are dogs when we were told there are no dogs. And we see flammable items around whatever the fire apparatus is. And it's not that people are intentionally trying to disregard what they shouldn't do. they don't know what they shouldn't do. You know, you don't know what you don't know. I'm sure you guys didn't know today that in the fire code, it says you should have the chimney inspected upon every sale. You know, if you don't know, you don't know. It just is what it is. And that is commensurate with the insurance risk of insuring a property. So our role is to educate the client when they call in, to have these hard discussions with them on what is the property, what's in the property, how old is the property, what kind of insulation do you have? When was the plumbing updated? When was the roof last replaced? We have to ask those hard questions. And I can tell you, usually the homeowners, they don't have a clue. They don't know. So we're resorting to Zillow or calling the listing agent or Google Earth. You know, we're trying to figure it out as well. It's a mystery. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes it's not a good thing. We recently had a client and they sent their policy in. They were purchasing the home for $700,000. Their insurance was for $400 and some thousand. And it very closely matched the Zillow estimate of value. Well, here's the thing. The property had been completely remodeled. The property appraised for $800,000. Are these people underinsured? Yeah, they are. You know, that's scary. If you don't, if your insurance agent is not asking really good, hard, tough questions, it's not a good fit. Like, you want to make sure that client is properly covered in as many circumstances as you can. Open floor for questions. Yes, ma'am.
So Ben mentioned in his presentation something about chimney fires. So a chimney fire can be different from a fire that burns your possessions in your home and that kind of thing, right? You could have a chimney fire and not know. Could you?
That's correct. Chimney fire is not the same as structure fire, but can be.
So if there was a chimney fire and it did damage to the structure, like you were talking about, showing us some of those photos, is that something that your insurance could cover, like to repair the structure of the chimney? Or is it only if it's in your home and it, you know, burns your possessions and things?
No, it could cover the
Repeat the
chimney.
question.
So her question was, the differences between a fire inside your home and a fire in the chimney itself, like encased in the chimney. And the fact that people may not know they had a fire in their chimney, and that is a possibility that someone may not know there was a fire there. And would the insurance cover it if it was a chimney fire? And yes, I mean, typically, as long as the client's answered all the questions and been very truthful, you know, yes, insurance is going to cover that.
What does the fire chimney look? I don't have a fireplace. But what is a fire chimney? I mean, you're burning, right?
Right.
Burning something in your fireplace and a bird's nest is built up there, or some reason that something else is now. How would the homeowner know? What would the signs be?
Okay, so her question is, how would the homeowner know if there was, say, a bird's nest or something inside the chimney and the chimney caught on fire? How would the homeowner ever know that? Well, you're gonna find that out from Ben when he comes out to look
No,
at
but when it's
that.
happening, like to call 911, or what are the
Well,
signs of that?
A lot of
Smoke
times your
coming out this
neighbors,
way, or-
like a lot of times your neighbors will say, hey, you know, there's flames shooting out the top of
Oh,
your
okay,
chimney,
okay.
right? Possibly you could get smoke back down.
And a good rule of thumb, if there's smoke in your house coming from your chimney areas, call 911. Because the first thing that the insurance is gonna ask you is, did you call the proper authorities
Right.
as soon as you saw the problem? You know, you can go ahead and ventilate and get as much smoke out as you can, but you really need to have 911 called as soon as possible.
Right.
Could you repeat that, please?
Right. So Lisa reiterated that it is very important to call 911 as soon as you realize that you have had a fire. If you don't realize you've had a fire, and let's say Ben comes out and discovers damage, then you do want to call it in and say, hey, apparently at some time we had a fire. We had our house inspected on this date. We had our house re-inspected, and now he's telling us we had a fire in our chimney that we knew nothing about. So potentially, based on the cost, you may want to file a claim at that time.
So
We
if
are
you
out
didn't-
of
if you
time.
kept it up, but you didn't catch it when it happened, the fact that it happened between the last.
We're
time
out of
that-
time. If we could
Yes.
hold the questions and just ask everybody afterwards. Thank you all.